Here on the Creative Thinker Podcast, we discuss all theories, philosophy, and thought behind the creative process. And we hope that you find some inspiration along the way.
Hello and welcome to the Creative Thinker Podcast. It's great to have you back. I hope you had a wonderful Labor Day weekend if you're here in the States. To the rest of you around the globe, thank you for your patience. Obviously, we've made some improvements to the studio. Thank you for your patience as we continue to improve the audible chocolate we send your way. Welcome to the Creative Thinker Podcast. My name is Henry Moon, and I am joined by
Michael Vasquez, the reason we have been delayed the last couple weeks.
Yes. And that could have been a secret, but I mean, he's telling you, so it's out there now.
I will take the blame.
His fault.
Been traveling a little bit, but I think it was a nice break and will help us kind of go into some of the topics for today. And I'm really excited to dive deep into these topics.
As promised, we're delivering you the stat block episode of monster creation. We're also going to go in a little bit deeper to monster creation than we did last time, and try to stick a little bit more towards the functional elements. This go round, since we gave you a lot of theory last time, we're going to try to get in the engine and get things rolling for you guys this time. So without further ado, welcome back, and monster creation stat block episode. Let's get it.
Here we go. So first question we want to ask ourselves is, how do you go about, we're specifically talking right now about home brewing a monster. In our monster creation, we're going to be home brewing some of our own monsters. We're going to talk through a couple of these points. We're going to hit stat blocks at the end of the episode as we talk about some of the finer points. We will talk about 3 grounding questions to consider first, and then we'll start talking about how to think about the stat block, and then we will live create a stat block at the end of the episode. We're going to talk about a couple of monsters to add some lore to Roween. So when we're talking about our 3 grounding questions, our first question is...
Well, first of all, Roween, we keep adding to. We're gonna put out a pamphlet, like a little playthrough guide here sometime in the future. But every time we do a little world building, we're writing that down for you guys so we can put it out as a little one piece thank you product for you guys to maybe shell out $1 or so for, and so you can play through it at home, easy peasy lemon squeezy. So okay, so the first question, where are we at? Grounding questions to consider first. How gritty? I'm kidding. How gritty or dangerous do you want the monsters to be? Is the first question that we have on the block. And this is an important one because if you're playing like, I don't know, a Care Bear campaign, you don't want to come in with like Dracula as the monster, just ripping people to shreds, blowing blood everywhere, just complete monster attack. You want to make sure that your monster is fitting your world. Obviously, that's an obscene example, but you want to make sure that your monster fits the vibe of your players. If your players are not some, the type of people that want something heavy and gritty, which we weren't when we started your campaign all those years ago.
Yeah.
So we had a little bit more like drunken bar fight kind of fights, like low consequence kind of stuff, not a lot of blood, not a lot of gore. And then now we're into pretty gritty stuff. So just making sure that your monster fits your world. So what are we looking for when we're looking for how gritty? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah, so I want to use the example of just wolves as we talk about what gritty means. So we have something to, again, ground us here. So we're going to talk about 3 different tiers of grit or danger, right? So we're going to keep it super simple. Less gritty, mid-tier gritty, and more gritty or more dangerous. So again, we're going to be using wolves. It's in fantasy, we see a lot of wolves as kind of the enemy, the predator for the town or whatever. So a less gritty creature for wolves, for our example, would just be like small pack wolves, right? So they're not super dangerous. Maybe you can, your adventuring party, and we're going to be talking a little bit more about D&D, right? Because we're talking about stat blocks at the end of this. So these wolves, they're going to have basic stat blocks, right? They're going to be super simple, probably low HP. This is going to be for a low level adventuring party, potentially. And they're not going to have a lot of attacks, right? They're not going to have a lot of crazy cool abilities that they can use, unless if it's one creature, maybe against a venturing party, maybe. But what we're talking about is an adventure party going out trying to defeat these wolves. Less gritty means very basic. Should be a pretty easy job. This is an introduction into maybe adventuring, so that they get the vibe, they get the feel of what it's like to go out and maybe hunt these wolves, track the wolves, and then once ever it comes to fighting them, it's pretty simple, pretty easy, pretty basic. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like 10 to 30 HP. There's maybe 6 or less of them, right? Like you just stumble into this group of wolves, and it's like, okay, well, if you're low level and you don't really pay too much attention to spacing out your attacks or what your tactics are, you might die, but probably not.
And then you can also, and I don't remember off the top of my head, but wolves might have pack tactics. So talking to the D&D players who already know, or the DMs that already know, maybe take pack tactics away so that they don't have advantage on those attacks when they're attacking if they have an ally next to them. And in a less gritty monster, maybe we take that away and we just make it super easy, super simple, not a super dangerous, I can't remember what the word is all of a sudden, but not a dangerous encounter for your players. Less gritty.
Low CR.
Low CR, maybe half or 1.
And then for mid-range, what are we looking at?
Mid-range, what I would think is now we add that pack tactics back in. So if you don't know what pack tactics are, it's a term for a monster that if there is an enemy or an ally in 5 foot of an enemy, then it gets advantage on the attack. If you play D&D, you know advantage is very crucial to combat encounters. So we add pack tactics on. Maybe we add a couple more wolves to the encounter. Maybe we buff up their HP a little bit. Maybe we have an alpha wolf here who is a little bit grungier. So we still have those less gritty wolves, but now they all have pack tactics. And then there's one that has more HP. Maybe it has a multi-attack, which at low levels, a multi-attacker is a really big thing and becomes a little bit more dangerous. There's a little bit of a hierarchy here now. And it's still a moderate threat. We should still be able to take out the lowly wolves, but this alpha wolf, maybe it's not a giant wolf yet, but maybe it is, as we're talking about these tiers.
Maybe like 20 to 50 HP on that sucker, and maybe they've got like you said, a second attack, or like they go 1 damage die higher. So if you're talking like a D12, you go to a D20 or something, you know?
Yeah. So
D8 to D12, whatever.
D8 to D12, and then maybe you
D100.
Maybe you add a pounce attack to it. A pounce would actually knock a player down, and then it would get advantage on the attacks without even having anyone near it. Maybe we add a legendary action or a legendary resistance or some type of extra villain action or extra oomph to your creature that doesn't follow the rules or the stat blocks of some of the other creatures. And as we continue to talk about specifically stat blocks and abilities that they can do, there are a lot of other resources as well that kind of go a lot more in depth for those villain monsters. Dungeon Coach is a big one that I've learned a lot from. And then Matt Colville has his own, I think they're called action-oriented monsters, that they add a little extra to the monsters. And then, of course, some of the newer D&D books, they have more options for the big bosses so that they actually feel a little bit more gritty or dangerous, because that is something that you see in D&D a lot, is a adventuring party can go in and one-shot your big boss. As a DM, doesn't feel great. As a player, I'm sure that feels awesome, you know? Yeah. But if you want to add some suspense, add a little bit more to it, you could definitely add some of these legendary actions, add some, I think the Dungeon Coach calls it apex actions. I really like that term. And a couple different ways that you can modify it to make them a little bit more dangerous. Again, if we're trying to get like really into the details of the terms.
It's kind of like how paladins have like divine smites, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're just adding like your legendary actions, you're adding your pluses.
Mm-hmm.
It's just another way to do damage. Like you can add it for flavor however you want, but you have your regular, say it's a wolf, a bite attack, and then on top of that, let's say this particular wolf is like venomous for some reason or has rabies or something. It's like, okay, well now you add poison onto that attack. That's just another D6. You can flavor it however you want. You have another D6 action for this particular wolf because he's in charge. So you want to make sure that he is a target and a priority, which is why you up that HP.
Yeah, for sure.
And that brings us to the big bad wolf.
Yeah.
The wargs, right? Like from Lord of the Rings, the big...
Yeah, well...
Where are we at?
Then we're talking about more gritty, right? The most dangerous or more dangerous in all of this. And that's where we kind of flavor a little bit more of what I was talking about. A little bit more action-oriented, a little bit more legendary actions, legendary resistances. And those legendary resistances can be utilized in a couple different ways. Maybe they can help regain health for the animal. Maybe they are the wolf. And maybe this wolf is now kind of morphed into this like giant, almost like if you see pictures of like Fenrir, I would think of like that, like the Viking wolf, or the Viking like mythology or Norse mythology wolf, this Fenrir, this larger than life wolf. You know, through the adventure, you start hearing like people exaggerate how big this wolf is to try and like put points that this wolf is dangerous. And you're like, it's just a wolf. It's just a big wolf. And you've dealt with big wolves before. Now we have this giant wolf, and it is, you know, it's got more than one attack. Maybe it's got 3 attacks. Maybe it's got legendary action. So on its turn in one round, it can hit maybe 4, 5, 6 attacks per turn, which is crazy if you only have maybe 3 or 4 adventurers at a level like 4 to 5 party. So we add that. We add some maybe resistances and immunities. So then, you know, maybe it's immune to slashing damage. So it has to be piercing, or immune to bludgeoning damage. So it can only be piercing or slashing damage, right? And maybe, you know, it has, but maybe it's vulnerable to fire damage. You know, so we start adding a little bit more to it. We buff up that HP a lot. When you're talking about 50 HP, in a party like yours that I run for you, I would definitely not put anything like 50 HP would be less gritty for me. More gritty would be closer to like 100 to 200 HP if it's a monster that has a bunch of other things with it, you know?
Yeah, definitely. If it has that that mythology that comes with it, that wonderful introduction that says this thing is going to take you guys down. Like, you want to make sure that this is not something that's going to get pushed over. And definitely, if you've been playing a D&D campaign for a while, you've got a good idea of how much damage that party can do in 2 or 3 turns. And you want to make sure that it's at least, you know, 4 to 5 rounds of combat. And that also means that you want to make sure that if it does max damage, that it could probably kill one of the characters. You don't want it to be like, if it does max damage, I could probably incapacitate one of them. It's like, no, if you do max damage, you want to make sure that it takes somebody out. You want to make sure that it is bringing the pain, so to speak, and living up to that reputation, because otherwise, you know, I mean, how gritty can you go if you're not willing to kill off some of your player characters? So you want to make sure that it is intense. You know, you're not trying to, the goal is always to make it fun, right? But you're not trying to make everybody cry and make them go home sad. But sometimes that is also good. I mean, especially, we've done it a few times in your campaign where it's like, oh man, that was a bummer. I'm going home now. You know, like,
yeah.
But that's the thing. If you watch any entertainment, there's no stakes if there's no stakes.
Right.
So if you're not worried about any of the main characters dying, spoiler alert, Glenn from The Walking Dead, when he died horribly, if there's no stakes, you don't care anymore. Like, that show had been on the air for, I think it was like season 6 when that happened, something like that. Anyway, don't at me, but anyway, once he died, it was like, okay, well, all the main character is going to live forever, and then they killed him off, and you're like, oh my god.
And then they killed Abraham in the same breath too, and I was like, oh snap, this is for real.
Like, we're cleaning house.
Yeah.
Somebody didn't want to renew their contract. But yeah, so you want to make sure that it's living up to the hype, and it not only has a bark, but it has teeth.
So hopefully that gets the point across when we're talking about, you know, less gritty, less dangerous, kind of that mid-tier grit, and then a little bit more dangerous, more gritty. As we're talking about that, that's one of the things that sometimes we get away from talking about. Specifically, we'll just say, you know, more gritty or more dangerous and leave it at that. But that's specifically when we're talking about gritty or dangerous, what we're talking about on those kind of 3 tiers right there.
Yeah, and just like one quick summation is like, okay, less gritty, straight out of the Dungeon Master Handbook, right?
Yeah.
The exact verbatim straight out of the book, is less gritty. Those monsters, especially if you've been playing for a while, even if you keep them at the same CR, experienced players are going to blow through them easy. So that would be less gritty. Mid is when you start adding on another hit dice for any action, and then bump up their HP. I would say usually double is what I go for. And that's like a good rule of thumb to start. And then for gritty, more gritty, the most. Then you want to make sure that it is up to snuff to go like 4 or 5 rounds with your players, and you want to add those legendary resistances, regular resistances. You want to make sure that they have at least more than a few attacks. You want to make sure that they can dole out damage to maybe each one of the members of the party, or one extra attack even.
And I think when you even talk about more gritty, you can even as a DM, I have been trying to toy with it, but the encounters we've been running have been kind of big scale encounters, so I forget about some of these. But passive abilities, what is something that it just does? The monster always has. I think I heard the example of like a dragon. A passive ability of a dragon might be whenever you're within 10 to 15, 20 feet of it, you just take damage, because a red dragon, it's so hot and exudes so much heat. I think I did that in y'all's dragon fight, where you just take damage no matter what. There's no save, there's no nothing. You're taking damage from this legendary creature. So a more gritty creature, figure out what that passive ability is. I heard on the way here, a passive ability for someone's dragon that they made to make it just a completely different encounter than I've ever heard of, is every time the dragon got hit, it blew its fire breath straight ahead. And I was like, ooh, could you imagine like 3 turns and he gets hit, and every time it gets hit, it's shooting fire breath, but in a line. So it causes people to actually move around as it faces a certain direction. So I think that's a very interesting way that you can change your monsters and add those passive abilities, and that just ups the scale so much more. And I think I did on the Titan fight, you missed an attack and it was like, it's still going to take a swing at you as a reaction, because that's one of the abilities that it has, is if it takes an attack, it can dish out an attack.
Like I look at more gritty encounters as like a timer. Time is ticking down. The longer it takes to kill this thing, the more certain it is that my character is going to die.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's the way it should feel. If you're going in for gritty, you want to make sure that your characters know if you're staying in this fight, you're dead. Because that keeps the pressure on. That's what you want.
Even
pump those stats.
And then to add just one last thing for a more gritty thing.
Nice. Let me zoom in for this. Yeah.
Maybe you give it hit points every turn. Just give it hit points every turn. It's something that I've done that has helped make the combat encounter last a little bit longer. It continues to gain hit points. Continues. So add that little thing. Maybe it's 1d20, maybe it's like 3 or 4, and then that's how much it heals that turn. So to be fair,
I'm so mad at you right now.
Through my characters are OP, so they can dish out 500 points of damage in a turn.
Yes.
So 40 hit points back is not really that great in the grand scheme of it, but we're gonna go past that point.
So that is less, mid, and more.
Yes.
So that brings us to our next question, which is something to again ground your monster. What campaign setting do you want to be in? This is really important because it's so easy, especially in D&D. People just go to the monster manual and they're like, "What's around? Flip page, flip page, flip page." But if you're listening to this, it's because you want to spice up your game and you want to make it into something that is more fun for your players, more customized, and get some talking on the drive home, right? So you want to make sure you customize your monster to your world, which is largely what we were talking about in the last episode, but we want to hone in even more and give you some more tips. So we broke it down into three or four questions.
Yeah.
Depending on how you splice it, that can really help ground your monster in your world. So they are as follows.
Yeah. So the first one, I guess the first 2 points that we're going to talk about is it really depends on the setting that you're in, on how you create your monster. So obviously, if your setting is near or around water and you want your monster to come from the water, it should have some type of gills on it, right? Make it believable that it actually came from the water, whether your party is in the water and has gills, or has now come out and it can also breathe, and you can see like the gills moving. I think that's a very interesting way to ground it so that this creature is from the water. I mean, as simple as that. And then again, going back with just like where the setting is at, make your monster have some of those type of things.
And none of these are like hard and fast rules, but if you go against the grain, say like, okay, well, I don't want it to be a monster that's in the water of the water, be intentional about that.
Mhm.
So it's like if you just want to have some sort of ghostly creature and it comes up out of the water, okay, maybe. But if you give your characters like, I'm gonna have a hawk come up out of this lake and just kill all my characters like that, that would just bum me out as a player.
Or like we were talking about, like, I mean, again, I always trying to think of like, how could I flavor that to make it work? But like if wolves started coming out of the water, again, I think that would be cool. But you would have to flavor it the right way.
Like
so
water wolves, maybe.
Yeah,
you know?
like what change are you giving? What ability are you giving these wolves? Like now they're immune to fire damage because they come out of the water or something like that, so you have to flavor it that way. And then again, just the setting, if you're in a forest or a jungle, like look at forest or jungle animals and see what you can take from the inspiration from that and add it to your monster. So I said it should probably have some type of camouflage if it's in the forest or the jungle. I think that's important. Look at the ecosystem. If you're trying to create your own monster, D&D Beyond has a lot of good resources, and I believe Xanathar's Guide to Everything has a random encounter table based off the environments. So you could use that as a real quick and easy resource based off the monsters that are there. Maybe you create your own monster from there. You can use something there as well, but sometimes it doesn't make sense for your setting. I've definitely used it before, and I was like, man, that just doesn't feel right for the setting. So I did the random roll, and I was like, nah, I'm not going to pick that. I'm going to pick something different that makes a little bit more sense, but it's around that number because it's usually on a table of 100, and it's based off different CR levels. So you could also do that. Look at the environment that's there. Look at what type of monsters it says, because some of them get creative. Like I believe like black or green dragons would be in like a forest or a swamp area, which I wouldn't have initially thought of, but that would be like, okay, that now I can create some, dragon type creatures in this area.
Yeah, it's super cool. It definitely makes the process a little bit smoother if you're hung up.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you want to make sure that your monster is set in the world, so to speak. Like if they have wings, they have a purpose. If they have teeth, they have a purpose. If they have hands, what can they do with them? Right?
Yeah.
It's all about asking those questions, and in the same way of like character creation, we're trying to make sure that everything makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
The more you can make whatever it is you're writing or working on make sense in the world and be of the world and function in the world, the better off you're going to be. That's what's so cool about Pixar movies. I watched Elementals the other night, and everything is on theme. Everything.
Really?
And it's like, dude, that's so exhausting. Just watching it, I'm like, man, that took them forever. But yeah, that's one thing that kids' movies do really well is keep everything on theme. And the more you do that, the more you're sort of nestled nicely into the world.
Nice.
Another good question is, where is your monster in the pecking order?
I really like this question because I like the example that you used when we were discussing this before we started. It's something I didn't think of. I kind of thought about it in the sense of, is this monster a predator? Does it have something else that's a predator? Because that's kind of crazy to have this big monster and it's like it is also scared of something else. Do you want to go ahead and use the example that you talked about earlier?
Yeah, so like when the Balrog shows up in the Lord of the Rings, and there's all those orcs that are chasing down the party, and they're about to die, and they've been cornered, and then they hear that first thunk, and then there's like a light at the end of the tunnel, and all the orcs or goblins or whatever the hell, take off. And so it's like not
goblins.
Only,
so no Lord of the Rings fan comes at us.
Goblins.
All the goblins.
Thank you, the research specialist for the show. So anyway, all the goblins run off, and it's like the goblins just defeated our heroes.
They had them cornered.
Dead. And then this higher in the pecking order beast shows up, and they just run. No questions asked. So like maybe they were going to eat them. Maybe they were going to get something out of them. Otherwise, why would they chase them? And suddenly they just abandon all that and say, nope. Not getting anywhere near this thing. and that's such a baller introduction to a monster to begin with. But yeah, I think you can use that in so many cool ways.
I mean, I'm just
to set them in the pecking order.
Even thinking about our wolves example that we used earlier. Our adventurers go out and they're fighting these wolves, right? The wolves that are gathering the sheep or killing the sheep. They go out and now they're about to fight these wolves, and they see that there's one wolf that's bigger. They're like, okay, it's bigger, but like not really much. There's a bigger wolf mini that's out on the table, so it looks like the bigger one. And then, you hear like an ear screeching, like a howl, and all the other wolves, like their spines stand up, and then even mid combat, they're running. So they're going to use their actions to run on each of their turn. Could you imagine?
I'm mad already.
They're running, and then like the big wolf comes out, and it's like, oh dang, we've been wasting our resources, our spell slots on this, and now the big wolf showed up. Like that would be like you said, a baller introduction, and how you can use it in what we're creating already.
Yeah, and in terms of narrative, like Godzilla movies do this so good. Like Godzilla King of the Monsters, right? Like, so you hardly see him for most of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And he's out there. It's just like, okay, well, it's still a Godzilla movie, I guess. And then at the end, he shows up to defeat the big bad, and you're like, oh shit, here he is. And it's like, I've seen those movies so many times. I still get hyped every time I see Godzilla come up out of the water. I'm like, oh my gosh,
so cool.
So it's just a really simple narrative element. Like, why wouldn't you use it? Come on. Like,
so that pecking order, I think you could definitely use it to your advantage, and it can help you flush out not just your monster specifically that you're creating, but also kind of the pecking order, the hierarchy of the monsters in the area.
And if you have a hierarchy, you can also have a consequence for completing the quest, right?
Mm-hmm.
They beat this monster, so here is a worse one.
Yeah.
That it was keeping away.
They killed all the wolves, so what does that mean now? So what have the wolves been keeping at bay now that is going to be unleashed onto the village?
Yeah, like one of my favorite movies is Rango, and when he kills off the hawk, then they're like, well, now the snake's gonna come.
Yeah. Crazy.
That's the whole second half of the movie. Spoiler alert. No. So that brings us to number 3 under the ecosystem here is how do you change your monsters based on your setting? And like we talked about right there at the beginning was like gills or camouflage, but there's also like, what if this is not their native environment too? So if they have gills, but they can also sort of breathe out of the water, like how has their life been worse? Why are they here? Why did they get transplanted? You get a lot of like cool opposite questions that pop up from that. So those things are worth exploring as well. So just about how does your monster change? For me, like Halo is a good example of this. Like when you get into the heavier, like there's a lot of dropships section. I'm not as familiar with those games, but what stood out to me about those games was like when you're driving the Warthog and then suddenly all these dropships show up and you have to get out.
Yeah.
And it's like all these grunts and stuff are falling, and it's like you're shooting them as they're floating in the air, and it's like you have to get them before they hit the ground, because as soon as they hit the ground, you're toast, right?
Yeah.
And it's like this mad dash. I really love those moments where it's like, okay, you're almost out of time and you have to do this now. In games and movies too. But that's one that really stands out to me, is like they're out of their normal environment. They're just not on the ground.
Yeah.
It's like normal transportation shit, but since it's happening in battle, it can benefit you.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things when I was thinking about this, like if we're talking about homebrewing a monster, how do you take monsters that you've seen in other mythologies and other forms of media, and then how do you use them for your setting? I believe we've talked about this quite a bit, especially when it comes to my D&D game. It's, in particular, I've taken the brutes from Halo. Speaking of Halo, I've taken the brutes from Halo and then just changed some of the weapons that they use. So that's still kind of like this brutish. They usually have heavier weapons. They use hammers instead of great swords and things like that. They have armor pieces that are more weapon than armor. And you're able to change those little things, because you're not taking guns in D&D. Some people do, but not in my setting right now. And you change just the little things, and then you start creating a stat block, and then we'll get a little bit more into how you create your stat block later. But we're going to start. We have that idea of how we're changing it from one setting to another. So now instead of these spacefaring Vikings, they're more of a land-based kind of Viking-esque group that have honor still as part of their system. And as you read lore about it, they have these hierarchies of chieftains, and so to be like the great chieftain of the brutes, it comes with this very high level of respect from all brutes. So still keeping that setting there, and of course we're kind of getting away from the wolf monster, but this is still a monster nonetheless that can be an enemy for your campaign or for your setting that you're running. So, that makes sense?
Perfectly. Yeah, I thought that's a good explanation. So I was prepared to move on.
Cool.
Which brings us to out of ecosystem, which is number 2 on our list of questions that ground your monster. Number 3 is how long has the monster been in the area? And this is a big question because you're talking about what is their mythology at this point, or do they have any? You're talking about what's the area of effect? Have they been kidnapping children for years? Have they been sort of oozing into this swamp for years, and now it's poisoning the local people into turning into zombie-like creatures? Like, what is the deal? What's going on in this ecosystem? Has this monster been here forever, or has it been displaced? Was a portal opened to another dimension and it just wandered through? Big stupid ape. So, what happened that led your monster to this area? I feel like this is a question that really sets up your quests nicely if you do it well, and it also just sort of, like I said, is another grounding question. So, what's their regional effect like in D&D? Like you were talking about earlier with that red dragon. Is this something where, like, if you wander into their lair, they've been here forever? Is the ground cracked beneath them? If they just sort of like crunch their claws, then fire sprays out of the ground around you. Like, have they baked the clay so hot?
Or what if they've made it so fragile that if any intruder comes in, just the weight of someone coming into their lair drops them and alerts them? Like it's a self-made trap because the dragon flies in and has weakened that area and knows, like, this is solid ground here, so I can stand here. This is the effect on the area in their lair specific. And so when they go in, any type of creature, whether it's just an animal wandering in, boom, falls, it's like free food. And maybe you describe it as, pits, or maybe the dragon has a little bit of magic and can make another lair there, or like a layer of flooring there for when people come in. So,
or maybe there's a along with their mythology, the opposition is there is a legend among evil creatures, and they're a legendary animal. So now other evil animals are coming to be in their presence. Like they're building their own party out here in the wilds. Yeah. What does that look like?
Then I was thinking too, like, what if the dragon is eating all, for simplicity's sake, eating all the deer in the area, and the other predators in the area don't have food to eat, so now they're scavenging against each other. And then there's, like they said, that legendary creature comes out, and it's a creature that has been fighting all these other animals, and it's like this, it's all clawed up, it's all scarred and everything, but it's had to fight its way just to survive because there's another red dragon here.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
And also, like, is it forcing, like in Reign of Fire, that movie with Matthew McConaughey and Christian Bale, where dragons take over the whole world, and so they have, like, the people have these hidden orchards that they cover in ash, they bury them, but during the course of the movie, it's found by the dragon, and the dragon burns it because it eats ash, and here's something that'll be like fresh.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so, anyway, I'm losing my train of thought. However, that would be another area effect that limits your human population, and when your wandering party enters the vicinity and they give them the quest, it's like, if you do this, we live.
Yeah.
If you don't, we die. So that's like another way to raise your stakes. How does their being in the area create the mythology? So if you do go the route of having them have making them residents of the area is what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
If you do go that route and it's like, okay, maybe they've been here for like 400 or 500 years, what mythology, what tales are told about them now?
Mm-hmm.
So if they're out there burning crops and stuff, like the whole religion is based around staying away from dragons in Reign of Fire. It's like the prayer before the kids go to sleep is like, dig hard, dig deep, and never look back.
Yeah.
Which is so cool, right? So like their whole culture is built around staying clear of dragons, and and that's part of the mythology. It's like, well, as soon as we meet them, this is going to be terrifying. And just looking for a weakness has killed off more than half of the people in this place. So it's seen as like a foolhardy quest. And that's also part of the mythology. It doesn't have to be as direct as, say, Thor's mythology or something. Like he has a mighty hammer, and like we're not necessarily doing it as a description in all times, in all places. You can also do it as this is a consequence of their actions. We've been in the presence of this evil for so long that we almost don't even think about it anymore. We just keep vibing. We keep being human beings or humanoid beings, and keep fighting our way through. Keep just trying to deal with the life that we have. And I think that absence is not a very explored story element, especially in American fiction. And I think that that's a really cool place for stories to exist. So you want to make sure that you're checking that out if you want to go more gritty, especially. And definitely if you want a baller entrance for your monster. So enough talk about that. Are we doing inspiration this week or what?
Oh, yeah. We do inspiration every week. Every week, we're here to bring our inspiration to you. And every week, we're surprised that we have to do this.
And we never have anything. It's not that we're uninspired people. It's just we don't plan ahead.
Yeah, no.
In that regard. Like, we do everything else. Obviously, the studio has been a certain amount of work, the lighting.
Yeah.
You've been working on the documents. We always have that document that we go through and set up every week, or at least every recording session. And it's like, we never set aside our inspiration.
And our inspirations tend to lead us to like the topics that we're going to be talking about anyways. So then we talk about the things that have been inspiring us already. And then it's like, oh yeah, time for inspiration. Let me think.
I've got one if you want a little more time.
Go ahead and vamp for me. Tell me what's inspiring you.
So I'm working on a painting. I'll share through the Instagram someday soon. Good. And anyway, it's a bit of a cross of Conan the Barbarian comic, alien depictions of art and things like that. Just general, like the xenomorph and things like that. I'm taking bits and pieces from different alien stories. And then also some vampire, some spider. I have this list of photos on Pinterest that is called creepy photography. And if you just look that up on Pinterest, you get some really weird stuff. And that's where I've been for the last like week and a half, is just scrolling. And I've also been like in a bit of a weird place where I feel like I'm existing, I'm living in life, but I'm also sort of behind a sheer veil, if you will, where it's like I'm just on the other side of what I need to be doing for life. If that makes sense. I feel like I'm just too far in my own mind where I'm not existing fully and presently. And so all those things sort of mesh together for this. I'm not even sure how big it is. I think it's like 24 by 36 or something. It's a decently sized canvas. And so I'm just have this alien wearing another alien's skull as like a helmet, and it's sort of blinged out a little bit. And it's leaning forward through this fiery fog. And like I said, I'll share it once it's done through social media. If you want, at Creative Thinker, which is CRTV THNKR on Instagram. Check us out over there. I'll share that painting once it's done. So those are the things that have really been inspiring me. For some reason, creepy art and like Sean Koss is another really good. He's a great creepy artist that depicts like mental disorders and stuff like that. He does a really beautiful job of it, and I don't feel like kind, polite artist can really show what like suicide ideation or depression ideation is really like, or what it feels like in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But people who really go like creepy, and I don't know, his stuff is really good. Check him out. But that's my inspiration lately, and it's led to a piece of art, and I'll share that with you. So that's mine.
That art is super dope. I walked in and I was like, what the heck? This is awesome. And he was like, yeah, I just did it last night. I'm not done with it. And I was like, you're not done? This looks freaking good as hell.
I got the rough draft on the wall.
It looks amazing.
Thank you so much. It's like 3.5 hours. Wow.
It looks amazing. Anyways, my inspiration, again, the sometimes the tough things is like there are some things that have been inspiring us that continue to inspire us. So for me, again, like I said earlier at the beginning of the podcast, I've been out for a couple weeks. We traveled to Ireland, my wife and I, and we were able to see a lot of sights, and that brought a lot of inspiration that continue to add on to the inspiration that I already have in my head. And one of the things that has really been a focus of mine, because I have been doing, what do you call it? Like structural organizations for so many different types of classes in D&D. So like I have a paladin organization, I have a wizard organization, and one that has really just been, I've been trying to toy with, is a druid organization and a druid order. And so we were able to go to this castle, and there was an area where like the druid lived. And it was really interesting to go out and see like what an old timey kind of druid would be living in. So it had like, there was a place where they cooked, and it was called like the witch's kitchen, and like a little enclave for where they lived. And it was really interesting to like look into there and just see how much like woods are around. And from that, I was looking up druid orders because I wanted to think about it. And druids have a focus in my game, but I haven't explored too much into it because one of my players, my wife's first campaign, she is a druid, but since we started playing our game, we haven't really gotten back to that first game, but we continue to talk about it. And I'm like, okay, like I'm ready to introduce more of like the druid order around that. And so I looked up, I think it's like a 1E D&D list of the order for the druid, and it's pretty much like druid of the first circle, druid of the second circle, and then there's arch druid, and then the great druid. But it was still really inspiring to look at like, okay, this is how their organization is sort of set up. This is kind of what they live in. And then how do I adjust this to a fantasy setting, into a D&D setting, and make it look a little bit more oomph, a little more cool. You guys played in a one shot and got to play as druids as well. And y'all's own creation, bringing what y'all brought to the table as the druids that y'all played, helped me in my mind be like, oh, that's so cool. Like you played like this water druid that was kind of like droopy, like water droplets were coming off of it, and used very specific like water or like lightning spells. Like it was very thematic, and I really liked that. So I was like, ooh, where do I add that into my world? So druids has been an inspiration for me, and just seeing, like I said, in Ireland, seeing that druid cave and looking at the druid order, it's been really inspiring, and my mind's been racing. How to add that into my game. I always want to add everything in.
Yeah. It's always good, Michael. It's always good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing your inspiration. Speaking of, if you're out there within the sound of my voice, if you want to share your inspiration with us, hit us up over on social. Or in the comment section on YouTube. We are also over there. We love talking to you guys, and we love just sharing the good that is creativity. So hit us up anywhere you like. So let's get into, you want to do stat block first, or you want to go straight to creating monsters for Roween and throw in stat block?
Let's just run through stat block real quick, right?
All right.
So when we're talking about stat blocks, what we're taking into account, and again, I referenced Matt Colville and the Dungeon Coach. They go a little bit more in depth on different ways to add the stat block. And again, we're talking about D&D specific right here. Obviously, there are other systems. There's Pathfinder 2e, and then the plethora of everything else, right? So this is specifically 5e. You can take it what you want from it, But as we're creating monsters, the simple and most easy thing to do is look through the monster manual and see if there's something there that matches the stat block that you want to the monster that you have. Super easy to do. Definitely started doing that a little bit more. And then you can adjust things like we talked about. So I think that we can add to it adapting and balancing the monster CR rating to the party. We'll talk about that a little bit, but it's a game you're going to have to play. Each party is a little bit different. And one of the Dungeon Coach's videos that I watched, and I should probably give you the link to add to the description so you can reference it. He references another video, and he has a system on how he does it. And I believe it's like your party's level, average party level plus 3 is a CR you want to be looking at. Some people change it. Some people do something different. I do not do that. I toy with things because my party's OP. So it's a little different. And then, like I said, looking at the monster manual, looking at some of the games that are some of the books that have come out, they have a lot of different and intriguing monsters. They're different. They're unique. And then you can add them into your game. And then you can start to add a little bit of abilities, add a little bit, buff their HP a little bit, decrease their AC a little bit, increase their strength a little bit, decrease something, give them an extra attack, give them an extra legendary action, take an ability away depending on the party level. And you're able to do all of that based off of stuff that's already there if you're not used to homebrewing these monsters, which I have had a couple years of practice doing these homebrew monsters. So that's kind of all we're talking to, all that we're bringing into this here. We're probably won't go into like, what does each ability of the monsters go into? We'll probably talk about like what their strength is and what it should look about. And yeah, so we're gonna start. Unless you had anything else to add.
I have one thing to add, which is if you're homebrewing a monster, I like to have 2 really important things: a spell or an effect that will give my monster health, just in case.
That's what I talked about earlier.
And then that's true. And then I would have something where it's like, if they reach a certain HP and it's looking bad for my party, and this was not meant to be like a really intense encounter, it'll be something to drop the monster's health. So like suddenly that attack has double damage, like just homebrew something to get yourself out of a jam, basically. So that when you're there, you're not just like, okay, his health is back up. You have something to like juice it if you need it, or get rid of the juice if you need to. Help kill him off or help keep him alive to help the thematic element. You know what I mean? Like just in case you're in a bind the first few times you play. Like you definitely want to play the game and let it play out, but the first couple times you do this in homebrew, it can be a little wonky. So if you have that sort of backstop, it can take that pressure off.
For sure. Man, there was something I was gonna say, but I forgot. So
I talked right over you.
We'll just move right. What was the first point that you had said? I can't remember.
Adding health, a spell that had health.
Yeah.
Coming back? No.
Yeah, do that. Like I said earlier, it can definitely help. Or maybe it can be like on a recharge, which there are certain abilities, like a Dragon Breath has a recharge. So after it uses it, it needs to roll a d6 and it has to either roll like a 5 or a 6 or a 4 to a 6. And there are different ways to do it. You can either do it like that, or it can be like every other turn it gets its Dragon Breath back. And that's maybe how you do the healing. Or it only heals after it's taken a certain amount of damage, or if it's under a quarter HP, it can regain just a little bit of health. So there are a couple different ways that you can do it. And as you play, you can start, picking things up. Look at video games, honestly. Look at how they deal with creatures and stages. I think that's something that I've been trying to do a little bit more, is at, a third health, or when the green bar goes to yellow, it kind of changes into a phase. And then when the yellow bar goes into red, which is 2/3 of the health is gone, it reaches its final stage. It becomes the most dangerous. And then from there down, have some type of potential healing ability, or just let them know like it's close to being down or entered the bloodied condition, which is half health.
Nice. All good information. Now let's return to the jungle town of Rouen. If you've been listening for a while, we revisit Rouen quite often. It's a fun little jungle town we've put together. Furbolgs live here. They are living over the, I guess, caved out form of a dead god. And there's so many shenanigans and weirdness and things that we've built into this. Again, we're putting together a little pamphlet that has everything about Roween that you need to know. So eventually it'll just be out there for you to experience if you go back through these episodes, and you'll just be like, oh, wow, that's where it started. Cool. So anyway, we're back in Roween, and we're going to create a couple of monsters here live on air. And just as a side note, to stroke my own ego and yours as well, we don't cut together these episodes. We record them straight through. So you're welcome. Now you know.
Yeah.
So when we mess up, it's just in there, baby.
That's why we say live on air.
Live on air. So without forethought, we are going to create some monsters for Roween. So one of the cool things about the caved out dead god is that it is a cave. And so the more I think about Roween, the more I think, like, what kind of creatures could we have? What about some cave creatures? What about some bat-like creatures?
Yeah.
How do we take a bat and turn it into a monster that your characters actually want to stay away from? And I like to steer clear of just creating large animals as my villains. I've done it before, and it seems like I never get a good reaction from the table. It's like, okay, you've seen a bear, but it's a big bear. Like, okay, well, I would like something better than that. Okay, well, how do we take this bat and turn it into something that's really intense, that's not Dracula?
Yeah. So again, we're going to talk about some of the steps that we go through as a homebrew. First thing that I like to do if I'm trying to create a homebrew monster is I'm going to look at the monster stats that are already available. So I looked up the monster stats real quick, and we're just going to hit just a few of the highlights on their stat block. So a normal bat for D&D Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition is a tiny beast with an armor class of 12 with 1 hit point. So is that going to be a challenge for our party?
No, it will not.
Okay, so already I'm thinking we're going to buff up the hit points, and maybe we still keep it small, but maybe we add a little extra oomph to it. Dexterity's got a 15, strength has got a 2, so not super strong. Going to be more dexterous than anything. Maybe we up that AC a little bit because it's a small bat flying around, so we're going to play it thematically as harder to hit. The bat has echolocation, so bat can't use its blind sight while deafened. Okay, cool. So if you, that's an interesting thing. So what if the party tries to find a way to deafen the bats? Then it can't see, it can't do anything.
I like that.
Keen hearing has advantage on perception checks, so it will probably find your party as they're going in, especially if they've disturbed the nest. And then its one action that it has is a melee weapon attack. It's a bite with a +0 to hit and does 1 piercing damage. So for me, if I'm not going to use this, because you're going to need to use this as like minions. And again, check out other videos on how to run minions in D&D. This would be a perfect minion because people have to waste their attack to kill it, but it only does 1 point, and I don't know. I'm not a fan of that.
So I like the things that I like. Okay, just as a bat, it can be sort of like Zuko, right? In the campaign we're playing. So Zuko is like a familiar.
Yes.
And
a pseudo dragon familiar.
Pseudo dragon familiar. So he doesn't have a lot of hit points, but he's got this sting that when he can drop people to incapacitated if it hits. And I like the idea of having like a soul bat, basically, where it's like maybe even if you're at the table, you play a certain song when it's around, but it's really hard to spot. Like maybe you jack the stealth up on this thing, and it has maybe like milky white eyes or something that makes it distinct whenever you run into one. And it's like, if it hits you, it'll steal your soul, which means you'll go down, you'll be incapacitated, and maybe you'll get transported to another plane or something like that.
Or you need to make a save, because I think that's the thing with Zuko, is it stings you need to make a Constitution saving throw.
Yeah.
And if you fail, it's like, oh, you're down.
Yeah. And so like some sort of, maybe this is as a consequence of it living in the cave of this dead god. It is literally used as a minion to suck up enough soul matter to revive the god. And we talked about different ways to revive it over the episodes. And so maybe there is all of those existing at the same time, and there's this small horde of bats, a couple hundred that are in this cave that you run across occasionally, and it's sort of like you hear that little bit of music whenever you enter the cave, and then it's like, oh snap, like we're gonna have to try really hard to perceive, like every round of combat we're gonna have to use perception on, because if this thing gets us, we could be gone.
So then there we add maybe we add a bonus action to hide, right? So hiding is actually an action that you need to use in D&D. So maybe we add that rogue ability where as a bonus action they can hide or disengage and not take an opportunity attack. So maybe we give it that bonus action to be able to do.
And maybe there's like D&D is always oriented towards the players. So maybe if you want to orient something, like if we have a real stealthy bat that can hide and that has flying speed. I mean, it's like, and you're in a dark cave, it's going to get to you and it's going to attack you at that point, right? So if there is, some like a character in your party that has detect good and evil, say, and maybe that's the one spell that it always appears on because it's like a very evil creature or something. Something that allows your party to not be incredibly perceptible to. You don't want to be super OP if you're making your monsters. And they don't always have to be big and scary like this. Like this is such a minor a nuisance because it's so small. And it's like if you run into it 10 times, you're gonna be mad. I killed the last 9. Why the hell is this thing here? And it's like the more you see it, the more sinister it gets. It's just kind of one of those that eats away at you.
I like that.
So not all your monsters have to be big, bad, scary things.
And then just for the sake of it, I want to check out what the giant bat stat block is, and then we will start creating the stats for that giant bat, or for the soul bat, as we're calling it.
Yeah, soul bat.
So giant bat is a large beast, which I believe a large beast in D&D takes up a 10 by 10 square. So it's a pretty big. This would be bigger than your adventurers. This would be bigger than the characters that you're playing here typically. Armor class of 13, it's 1 higher than before. HP, big difference here. We're looking at a 22 HP. So that went from 1 now to 22. So it's a little bit beefier. So maybe this would be, I think the challenge rating here is still 1/2. So nothing super crazy. Again, maybe if you have an adventuring party of like level 2 or 3s, maybe we bump that up just a little bit to maybe 60, 70, 80 potentially. Fly speed is 60 feet. It does now have a strength of 15, which is a big difference from that small bat.
That's carry people off strength.
It is carry people off and shove. And I think that's going to be the biggest thing that we can see here and we can add, because this stat block still has 1 action, and that 1 action is a bite, which does have a +4 to hit now. And it does, instead of 1 point of damage, it does 1d6 +2. So now you have a potential for a crit to hit twice, but it only has 1 attack. So what if, we have the giant soul bat who can do a shove attack? And what if, the cave that we're talking about, what if it's there are crevices where your adventuring party can fall, and that's a challenge. And now they have to survive getting hit by these giant bats. Maybe the encounter isn't kill the bats, it's survive to get across the bridge that you need to get to. And once you get across, they kind of like flutter up and leave you alone.
Like once you hit the swarm, they start flying around, and that's when they start getting shoved.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. That's a whole encounter right there.
Yeah, it sure is. So giant soul bat.
Nice.
Add the shove action. Keep the bite. Maybe we give it a multi-attack. Give it 2 attacks. Well, let's think how many giant bats are we gonna have in our cave down here?
I think that's what it's got to be. If it's the regular, like let's say a giant soul bat is like half of what the giant bat is, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
So it's like you've got maybe 30 effectively. So they're to get through them. Let's say you have 3 parties, you have 10 chances to hit them, and it's going to take them what their movement's 35 feet. So they got to go like 100 feet. So they got 3 turns of chances to get knocked off this thing. And then every foot is like 2 bats.
Yeah.
So I would say like give each 1 attack so that it's not
still
like
1 attack.
4 attacks per turn to knock you off the edge.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
Yeah. That starts feeling OP AF.
For that bite, do we still have that like the soul bite where it could potentially knock you out and incapacitate you?
I'd say like that's got to be like once per day or something that these things can do that. So it's like each bat only has 1 chance.
What if we do it like that recharge where it's only on a 6? So I've seen a lot of abilities. It's like it can do it once, and maybe it can do it a second time.
Ooh,
but
I like that.
And if it does do it a second time, it got really lucky. It was able to roll a 6.
I hadn't heard that rule before. That's a good one.
Yeah. I look at a lot of monster stat blocks.
Thus the expert label.
Soul bite recharge on 6.
Nice. Perfect.
Do we want to keep like the strength and the dexterity the same on that the giant soul bat?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's got to be pretty strong to knock somebody off a cliff, and it's got to be really dexy to be able to fly like a bat does. So I feel like those are true to form. Those fit good.
Yeah. It still has that kind of weakness. It has that echolocation still, so it has that keen hearing as well.
Yeah, if they can deafen the whole cavern, then you're pretty much. Or you could even have like, I don't know mechanically how that works, but like if they just make a lot of noise, that it's at disadvantage at that point, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, banging pots together or something can lessen their ability.
Yeah, and there's quite a few spells that they in the description say they make a really loud noise within a certain area, and maybe within the cave it kind of like echoes and makes it really hard. So then I would say like maybe they go in a random direction or have disadvantage on their attacks and their shove attacks and things like that.
Yeah, I think that would be a good addition.
Yeah.
And then the soul attack, like you said, recharge on a 6. And I think with that, it's almost like narratively I have to come up with a prison that they're now in. You know what I mean? Like they've got to be in a special room in the cave that's full of all these people that got their souls removed. It's almost like this little purgatory that's just for this god. So it's like, I don't know. To me, it's like if you give your characters a chance to work their way back to real life, like that can be fun too.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's like these bats are like the big encounter, and what if there's like some other like cavern creature that like grabs the bodies and takes them into the chamber? So the chamber isn't necessarily where the bats are at, but they have to get through the bats to eventually maybe get to that chamber.
What if it's instead of like the soul attack is like soul poison instead, where it's like they're basically priming the soul, and then this other monster that we will define here in a moment, it sounds like.
Yeah, I guess so.
Comes up out of the void, grabs them, and takes them to that chamber, and then they do the ceremony there. Then it gives your characters time, like a timer, to say, I got to get there, and then help so-and-so, because they went down. Yeah.
Soul poison to prime them for the ritual.
Yeah. Nice.
To the dead god.
DG.
Whoa.
Who's also working his way back, apparently. His or her.
So, I think the giant soul bat, we're keeping the stat block the same. Armor 13. Hit points 22.
I think that's fair. Like, if you get lucky, you can get it in 1 hit. Otherwise, it should be 2. Just because we started set at the top 3 adventurers, right?
Yeah.
So if 2 of them attack the same thing, it's definitely dead.
Correct. Yeah. So that's cool. That's cool. Hit points 22, speed 10, fly 60 feet, strength 15, dex 16, con is 11, intelligence is a 2, wisdom is 12, charisma is a 6, which I don't know how we would even have charisma. So I get it.
Drop that to 0.
Right. Blind sense is 60 feet, which means it can see out 60 feet without having to see its without actually having to be able to see it. So passive perception 11. Maybe we could add like passive perception. Maybe we can add that up, or maybe because there's a lot there, we don't need to.
It depends if you want to one shot this thing, or like have this thing be the only enemy, then I would pump up the passive perception.
Yeah, for sure.
And then did we give it the hide ability? Is that on the sheet?
It wasn't, but we can definitely add that to it. Yeah, so then we have echolocation, keen hearing, bite. All those are the same. Well, only things that we're adding to it now are the soul bite, which is now sounds like a soul poison bite, right?
Yes.
And it recharges on a 6. Soul
Otherwise,
poison.
once per day.
Bite recharge
Or
on a
long
6.
rest, I guess, if we're doing.
Or once per day. You figure it out.
Yeah.
And then we're adding a shove attack on it. So I guess you don't really need to add the shove attack, but I think putting it in the stat block would help it for the flare go like, okay, this is the goal. If it misses the bite, it's trying to push you off and kill you. All right, and then it's priming them for the ritual to the dead god. So there we go. I think we have our small soul bats if we want to keep them there too. And then we have our giant soul bat from what we talked about already. And then, yeah, for the giant bat, we can give it that bonus action. Hide or disengage, which to me, this sounds, even an adventuring party of 3 would probably have a challenge with this, even at level like 2, 3, 4.
And even if you wanted to, let's say if you had both sizes, then it'd be like, okay, well, there's maybe 5 or 6 of these giant soul bats, and then the rest are the little ones.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
And maybe if it's a swarm, then it's like they're swinging, and maybe they run into one of these big ones.
Oh, you know what, Dean? I think you can look up a swarm of bats.
Oh yeah, they got a stat block. That'd be interesting.
Swarm of insects, mechanical spiders, scarabs,
beetles,
maggots, quivers, undead snakes, animated bugs, insects, scarabs, rats, bats, swarm of bats.
There you go. Hey, sounded like some interesting campaigns in there in the mess.
It has the same virtual stats as a giant bat, except for the strength is less. Has some damage resistance, which is interesting.
Nice. To what?
Resistant to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage. So that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Immune to charmed, frightened, grappled, paralyzed, petrified, prone, restrained, and stunned. I believe that is a condition for most swarms, so you can't like cast something to paralyze it because it's a lot of the bats that are there. Swarm can occupy another creature's space, can move through any opening. It can't regain any hit points because it's a swarm of bats, so it's supposed to be the general consensus of the bats. And then has a +4 to hit, 2d4 piercing damage, or if it has half its hit points, 1d4 piercing damage. So, you know, you can use it as a swarm, you can use it as singles. I think I think we're pretty good with that.
Nice. So, there's our soul bats.
Yeah.
Number 2. So we have our soul bats. What comes out of the dark?
Ooh.
Are we doing that, or are we going on to a different monster?
I think I like that. I think I like that. That works better. So one of the creatures we talked about was Henry was talking about how in the jungle you typically see like, you know, snakes and spiders. So like, what if there's like some conglomerate mixture of both of them? So now we're talking about what if it's some like entity or some creature that the dead god has like brought together, and like that, what if that's a symbol of the dead god, like this kind of like snake spider creature, almost like what is it, the aliens that like go and incubate other people, the face suckers. What if it's like a face sucker but like it's got like a tail and maybe like a rattle or like a stinger? Well, no, it's a snake. Maybe it's got like a rattle, and instead of like face sucking, it's like
fangs from the spiders.
Maybe it still has like like spider. Okay,
like that middle mouth. Like,
yeah.
So
yeah, but we're talking about giant face suckers, right? This is gonna be our big like entity. Maybe there's like
maybe there's 4 max, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, and these have like the power of like the dead god. So
whatever's left.
Yeah, so we're gonna look at spider, snake, and I'm gonna put eldritch here because typically in D&D, you know, eldritch or your warlocks have eldritch blast, and that is a warlock specific ability, or it should be, unless you take some feats or whatever. it's a warlock specific ability that they're able to grab. So I think it would be interesting because they're almost worshiping this dead god, that it would have like an eldritch blast type of ability that it can hit people with. So already, before we even look at any other stat block, we're looking at eldritch blast. We're looking at a high strength because it has to be dragging things around. So high strength. And probably a high dex because it's probably moving around and it's pretty sneaky. Yeah?
I like that. And it probably climbs pretty good because it lives in a cave, and it's okay with goopiness because it is goopy.
Yeah. Oh, it is
Almost
goopy.
Like an octopus, kind of like it's just moving over things. It's just all wet and slimy.
What if so we're talking about some of the different abilities that we could give these monsters. What if like the goopiness is like a passive ability, so it's like a goopy kind of acid. So every time someone gets close to it or like walks into the trail of the goop, it just takes 2 points, right? Because we're talking about low level, so it takes 2 points of acid damage.
I like that.
In this, it doesn't have to do any action, bonus action, nothing. It's just an ability that it has.
What if maybe not once per round of combat, but something less than that? Every other round of combat, you have to make like a save, or you move your full movement in the trail of the goop, basically.
Oh,
like,
that's cool.
Like it's almost like taking in the vapor, smelling it is enough to maybe confuse the mind, right?
Yeah, so in D&D, they have a lot of like a lot of abilities that can control people. If you save on it once, you can't get controlled with it again. But this is what I like about it, is like maybe, like you said, like once every 2 turns, or whenever they walk on it, if they if they fail, they walk through the goop. But if they save, they can get out of the goop, but they don't know what happened there. You just ask them as they're moving, hey, you need to make a saving throw. Why? Just make a saving throw for me. And then if you do, it'd be like your character starts moving this way. And then like trying to make the character like understand, or maybe roll a perception check or an insight check or whatever. And then as more people kind of like walk across this line, like it's just a save, and it's like, why is it in the same spot? Why is it in the same fucking spot every time?
And also, like, not only if you fail, you get the guaranteed 2 damage, and if you're low levels, that's going to hurt. And you also move closer towards damage and more closer towards danger.
Yes.
And you're guaranteed at the start of your next turn, you're going to get that same 2 points of damage because you're standing in.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah. That's baller. I like
yeah.
that.
So we've already created a lot of cool stuff right there. Let's say we're going to go ahead and go back to our handy dandy D&D Beyond, and we're going to look up not paint. We're going to look up giant spider.
So what would be something for like they're only carrying off people who are incapacitated, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe they're not that strong.
Yeah, but you ever dragged an unconscious body before?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to parse out. Is it dexterity? Is it like what? Maybe sleight of hand is really what I'm thinking of. Like what they can't grip well. You know, it's like they can move well, they can carry, they're strong, but it's like smaller things like bodies they just have a hard time holding on to. It's like they just sort of roll it up in their arms and drag them away.
I think of Lord of the Rings, Two Towers, when they're up in the lair, and it's like it finds the unconscious body and it like does like the spinny thing and like keeps it in the mouth, or like puts it, I can't remember what exact. Oh, it was in the stinger, right, or some shit. When Frodo got like, because like
We're
Frodo
making the Lord of the Rings people mad.
Oh,
Calm down.
Fuck. Shit.
We're just here to piss people off. That's really the only reason for this.
Frodo at some point gets stung and he gets
put in a web.
He gets moved. What if they get moved like that?
Next time on the Creative Thinker Podcast. Yeah, dude. Yeah, so maybe there's just like these little gimpy arms, like a T-Rex or something that it carries with.
Well, like, look, it could use like those front two right there,
yeah,
to like grab it. Which we're looking again, giant spiders, D&D Beyond, like the front two, like
gimpy arms.
Yeah, gimpy arms. Like they grab it and they like
They're
hold
goofing.
it. They hold it like right here, and they scuttle up.
Scuttle is a gross word.
Yeah. So if we're talking about only 4 of them, we kind of want to get a little bit more nitty gritty. What is an armor class that seems appropriate for this? I would say low level adventurers, maybe an armor class of like 14 to 16 is what I'm thinking. Can still hit it, can still miss it, because typically at that range, at that level, you have like a plus anywhere between like a +3 to a +6 to hit. If you're really spicy and you can finagle it somehow, maybe you can get a higher plus, depending on your DM. But that's kind of what I'm thinking. AC around there. Do you have any objections?
No, not at all. I was gonna say 15 or 16. So
sweet.
I'm
sweet.
Right in the range. Right in the range. Right in the range.
We're gonna. What are we thinking about HP? Right. So there's 4 of them.
Turns out we are editing this episode. No.
just the end.
Just this part. We're gonna cut awkwardly and just do the outro. No, the HP I would say it's got to be pretty high. I wouldn't say like as high as a more gritty. I would say maybe like 80. 80. If they're lower level, because this thing it seems like it's gonna do a lot of damage really quick.
I would let's go 60 to 80.
Yeah,
60 to 80 I think would be good. And then the only thing I think these strengths are great for a giant spider. Right, yeah. Strength 14, dexterity 16, con 12, intelligence 2, wisdom 11, charisma again 4 somehow. Now it has a proficiency in stealth, so we're gonna give it a +7 to stealth. It's got blind sight, blind sight 10 feet, dark vision 60 feet. I think those are all great to keep in. It's got its spider climb. The web sense we would change to like goop sense.
Yeah. Like
so like if you stand
ectoplasmic sense.
Yeah, if you like stand in the goop, like it knows that you stood in its goop. So it like
I love that.
Then it starts to like it can track you maybe, or like it knows like, oh, there are things here now that are alive, and like it starts going, or all 4 of them. Oh, that would be so terrifying. Yes. If like 4 of them come up, you're like, oh, we're fuck.
You just start coming out of all the
tunnels
around you.
Yeah. So, or like you hear one show up, and you can like hear in the background like
creeping out somebody at home.
Yeah, I hope so. So we have a bite attack here. This is the giant spider bite attack. Do we want to keep that here? It's a 1d8 +3 piercing damage. Makes a Constitution saving throw or takes 9, which is 2d8 poison damage on a failed save, or half as much on a successful one. If it reduces someone to 0 hit points, they're stable but poisoned for an hour. And even after they regain hit points, they're paralyzed while poisoned in this way.
Whoa.
That's
intense. Yeah, I'm gonna start seeing these in your campaign. Damn.
Yeah.
No, I think we probably want to like flavor that. I would say like it would be a crush attack. Like it almost like just squeezes the victim, and it's when it's in conjunction with the soul bats. I changed to like Eldritch Soul Beast was what I changed the name to.
Yeah.
So it's like we're just like a goopy thing, and it's like if it works with the bats and you just happen to get the poison, then when it grabs you and squeezes you, it's like somehow the mixture of its poison and the bat's poison puts you into like this coma.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, the same rules apply, but we just got to flavor it over some.
Yeah. And again, we're talking
thanks D&D 5e.
Yeah, thank you D&D Beyond. D&D Beyond. Yeah, maybe we just do like 1d8 piercing and 1d8 poison damage, because I think 3d8 damage on a low level, like that could almost
brutal.
Yeah, like if you have a wizard in there that gets caught, like they're dead, or a sorcerer, or just someone who's got low shit stuff. So,
and if they do happen to trigger the thing where all 4 of them show up, forget about it.
It's super TPK right there.
Yeah. I like that. Lessen it a little bit.
Yeah, and then it has a web. I think we should flavor that for like some type of goop attack.
I never thought I'd look up synonyms for ectoplasm, but here we go.
Yeah. Like like there are some like not spiders. That would be scary. Snakes that like can like shoot poison out of their mouth or something? Or am I tripping?
There's some lizards that shoot blood out of their eyes.
Well,
so there's that. Not related, but there you go.
I don't want to see that. Could you imagine a spider snake beast just shoot stuff all out of the 8 eyes?
Oh my gosh. Yes. Okay. Yes. That's got to be in there.
Okay. So
that's the attack.
so, but it's, what if it's got like a number of eyes, and it's like whenever it loses all of its eyes, it just dies. And so like some of them have like, maybe you roll a D8 and one of them has all of its eyes. That's the newest. That's the most fresh, entity that has come alive. But like the older one's got like 3 eyes left.
Ooh, Ichor.
Ichor. Yeah.
Attack.
It's gonna have an Ichor attack. Ichor. Ichor.
Yes.
ICOR. Right?
ICHOR. All the grammar people who will never upset on the Creative Thinker podcast, as long as the internet holds true. As long as it doesn't let us down.
And then, what if? Okay. Because I said something about having like an Eldritch Blast. What if that Ichor attack is like flavored as the Eldritch Blast, and then does ooze damage if they stay in the same spot, or maybe like one on the next turn it takes another 2 points of damage.
Like at the end of your next turn, you get pus damage.
Yeah, God.
It's almost like acid damage.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just eating into the skin.
Yeah. Cool. I think okay. So high strength, high dex. It's got the goop. It's got
the goop, baby.
it's got
gotta have that goop.
The Eldritch Ichor Blast. It's got a crush attack, which can like paralyze someone. If they've been bit by the bat.
Yes, those conditions need to be met. Otherwise, you're pretty much
and just
all the time.
Just for I just looked up the same thing. I meant to look up giant snake. Just to see if there's anything from here we want to add. It doesn't look like it has a lot less of a stat block. So it looks like just using that giant spider stat block ended up working out for us. Yeah, everything cool. 90 hit points. That's crazy. 90 hit points, challenge rating 4. So if we're looking at all 4 of them, this would be a very deadly encounter for your group of 3, unless they're maybe level 5,
and
right?
If the soul bats are anywhere near, forget about it.
Yes. Yeah. So this could definitely turn into like a mild encounter to super challenging real quick. And super deadly real quick. But as I figured out, players sometimes find a way no matter what. So
we get real creative.
Yeah.
When we're nearly dead.
For real.
Like flipping through paper so fast.
I know, like, what are the items I have?
And the cool thing is this ties in really well with Zira, for anybody who remembers that character. The little old lady that lives in the cave. That's very stealthy and a quest giver. Anyway, it ties in real well with her. Go back to that quest episode. What was it? Quests and Twists. If you wanna hear more about Zira, if you haven't already. But yeah, I think this is a great in-depth guide towards monsters, and for everybody who was like, oh my gosh, there wasn't enough stats last time. Hopefully, we gave you enough stats this go round. And if you need anything more specific, feel free to reach out over on social media. As I've said 10,000 times, and I'll say it 10,000 more. We love talking to you guys.
And I absolutely love creating different stat blocks. I have a lot of resources. I have a lot of different ways that I can do it. So if there's like a monster or something, you're like, hey, I'm interested in thinking about like this monster. I want to stat it for D&D 5e specific. I definitely am able to do that.
Hit the road, Pathfinder. Get out of there.
I just don't know it. But yeah, so I think that kind of wraps it up here. Yeah.
Heck yeah. 2 creatives all across this wonderful little globe of ours. Thank you for joining us once again. Thanks for your patience over the long break. And can't wait to see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.